and just say, welcome everyone. This is on pilgrimage, communities along the Pilgrims Trail. I'm Andrew Stuck from Walk, Listen, Create, and I'm running this event with Lora Aziz from the World Trails Network. So an introduction from Lora and each of our guests, and then we'll get going. So Lora, over to you.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining us this morning, this evening, this afternoon, wherever you're based. I'm Lora Aziz, artist and cultural ecologist and researcher based in the UK. I'm representing the World Trails Network here tonight as a World Trails Network ambassador, but also co-chair of the Arts and Culture Task Team alongside Ali Pretty, who's also here with us this afternoon. I'm super passionate about championing culture, creativity, storytelling within trail networks around the world, and my current work is on the Saffron Trail in Essex. And it's a real pleasure to be joining Andrew for this final pilgrimage conversation of this series. And I'm looking forward to sharing ideas and learning from everybody's experiences this evening. And I'm going to hand over to our first speaker to introduce herself, and then we'll follow.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And as I just said already, so I'm Claudia, I'm based in Scotland, and I have been interested in the connection between walking and art for a long time. And what I'm particularly interested in is creating pilgrimages. So my work is less about, I'm not following existing pilgrimages. I have done that as well, but today I will talk about experimental and personal pilgrimages. And under experimental pilgrimages, I mean more things, pilgrimages will have been commissioned. They are not real personal goals as such. So my first one I want to talk about is called From Mountain to Sea. It's a project that is really near to my heart. I was commissioned by Aberdeenshire Council to create a COVID memorial for the people in Aberdeenshire. This is the shire I used to live in. A COVID memorial in Aberdeenshire, which I created a path instead of others would have maybe done a sculpture. And so what I suggested is to walk from mountain to sea, starting at Ben Macdui in the deep in the Cairngorm Mountain, and walk to Peterhead as a seaport that is both are based in Aberdeenshire. But what I needed to work with lots of people, and in COVID was the only thing we were really allowed is walk our own area, and so I walked from village to village. And connected with people, and that took me about 2 years to create this kind of path, which now people can use as a pilgrimage. And I walked with lots of people, lots of individuals, but also groups. And with me, I took pink tablecloths, the color of an ordnance survey map, which people, when after they walked with me, with the cloth was always a tablecloth or a picnic blanket, but after they walked with me, they signed it. And in the end, there was over 200 people who signed this, and I embroidered it into the cloth. So here we go. This is on the top of Ben Macdui. It's deep in the Cairngorm Mountains, and it's a very windy place. And I'm walking sort of. The first night you definitely need your tent, and then you reach a bothy. And I'm working here also with the Bremer Mountain Rescue people who created a bench for this walk, and go further down into Deeside. That's Balmoral. Many of you may have seen this. Was where the Queen lived when she came to Scotland. And on the bottom here is Loch Nagar. And this is Benahi, which is kind of the house mountain of Aberdeenshire. And you sort of go through forests and farmland, slowly reaching the North Sea. And so, as I said, there was always people walking along with me. And here's taking a place, a celebration on a similar windy day as we had it on Benahi at the starting point. And so people can now use this because I made a map It's about, I created as an 18-day pilgrimage that people can use and contemplate about the time in COVID that I had. And the stories are somewhere captured on the website, but also I engaged a musician who wrote a music for every stretch of the path. And because I engaged also a bench maker, so there are lots of these benches, bespoke benches made, and on the benches you find the music. So the music, the path, and the benches really created this path that was made by people, not just by me, but other people of the Shire. I also wanted to tell you about another project that I did recently, and that's for a village called Girvan. And it's quite a bit sort of tired because they had a lot of, it's south of Glasgow, and since people are traveling to Spain on holiday, they don't go on holiday there anymore. But they wanted me to do something that's sort of special about the place. And I discovered this woman called Elizabeth Gray. She is a Victorian fossil collector, but she was never made to fame because she was a woman. But all her fossils are in the British Museum. And so what really interested me is to go into her footsteps. But I was always intrigued how these women could work in the cloaks they had. And so I made myself a cloak that looked similar, but not was Victorian wool, but with today's materials of Gore-Tex. And then I walked, this is Girvan, to all the places that she must have hammered away. And you see myself here walking the coast and with special attention to the places where she collected those fossils. Yes, and today people can, I've created again a path that people can follow, the people of Girvan, and could be quite proud about. Good. Sorry, I'm rushing through this here. Now, one of my most important projects for myself, and this is now the personal pilgrimages, and that's I distinguish, this is really some personal wish, and there's a personal reason why I do this. And that was after Brexit. I was very, very upset, and I didn't know anymore where my home is. So somehow I don't feel like this anymore, but yeah, I sort of felt like I can't figure out if I'm welcome here still. And I used to live in a place called Huntly in the north of Scotland. And I decided to walk to my mother, which is south of Munich, and also where I was brought up. So this is a 1,800-kilometer walk, and it took me 90 days to do it. And here with my companion, I'm leaving Huntly and walking over the Cairngorm Mountains first, and then along the Pennine Way to England. And I took the boat from Newcastle and got into IJmuiden in the Netherlands and walk along the coast of Netherlands. And Cologne was actually halfway point. And then this is the kind of thing you see when you are walking like this. You know, it's kind of a 9 to 5 job where you leave after breakfast and you know every day what you do. You just walk. And at 5, you try to sort of check in where you are staying and wash your clothes and write your diary. Yeah, it's sort of quite a routine. And this is the kind of thing you always see. When you're in Bavaria, you always on the horizon see a kind of, what do you call it? I'm not sure the English word, but it's a cross because it's Catholic area. But in my case, I didn't write a diary. I wrote every day a postcard to my mother. And first here, the red ones are the British ones, the English ones, and the yellow, the orange ones are in Holland, and then the yellow ones are in Germany. And on the right-hand side, on the bottom, you see my mother collecting all these postcards on her living room door. And the other thing I collected was oak leaves. So I love oaks, and I think they're a really important symbol for longevity and for peace. And so I collected an oak leaf every single day and had a nice herbarium of 90 oak leaves. And you see the first one here, very fresh and green and small. And on the right-hand side, so getting more tired by the end of September when I arrived in my mother's village. And yeah, this is where we arrived. I also had Nick, my companion, with me here. And this is my mom. And she always says she isn't as small as that, but actually she is. And sadly, she is now not with me anymore. And I'm very glad for her also that I managed to do this. So this was an important project for me personally, but also for my mom. And so I was given very few minutes, so I'm finishing now. But 2 weeks ago, a very good friend of mine, an fantastic artist called Christine Borland, died after a long illness, and we buried her on Friday. And sorry, I actually have one more picture of this because people always, I tell you about this in a minute. People always ask you, have you actually found what your home is? And I now always say it's actually the people I meet on the way. And I've been hosted by lots and lots of people on the way, and that's really what I feel is my rucksack is my home, and also these people that I know in my life, not really the one village or the other. And so I was just once gonna tell you about this friend who died and was buried. And I think this is not a pilgrimage I can show you, but this will be my next mission that I walk to her. Will be about a 10-day walk. And if I feel this the best tribute I could do to her is to walk to her across from the east coast to the west coast of Scotland. So thank you very much for joining my path. Okay.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and thanks for sharing such personal and yeah, treasured moments in your journey. Shall we move on now to Omar?
Yes. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you again, Claudia, for your interesting testimonial and sharing your experience while moving. We're now moving to another part of the world, the Eastern Mediterranean, and exactly we're talking about Lebanon. This is Lebanon, surrounded from the west by the Mediterranean Sea here, and from the north and east by Syria, and by Israel on the south. So you can imagine the political context already that you're hearing a lot about during the past 50 years, because it never stops. We always have surprises, but we try to survive and live the best way possible. Today, I'm going to share with you our experience on the Lebanon Mountain Trail, which is the longest hiking distance trail in Lebanon. It stretches from the north here on the borders with Syria up to or down to the south with the borders with Israel, crossing 80 villages. And what is interesting here is that it crosses communities of different religious backgrounds. So you can start in a Catholic, in a Roman Catholic village, move to a Greek Orthodox village, then move to a Sunni village, then back to a Maronite Catholic village, then move into a Druze Muslim village, and so on. And this brings some interesting stories to people to discover what is common in the cultural heritage of these people, but what is also different, and to also discover the diversity in nature. When we say Lebanon, we're talking about the greenest Eastern Mediterranean country, since the highest peak is 3,088 meters, with eternal snow. Almost the snow is there, contrary to the Gulf and the Arab countries where water or where the greeneries are much less than we do have. So we have the coast and we have the mountain, and this is what makes Lebanon unique in this part of the world. So, in brief, the mission of the Lebanon Mountain Trail is to conserve, manage, promote, and advocate for the LMT, and we definitely focus our work on trail development, on conservation, and community development. So you are all invited to join us either during the fall or during the spring at our hikes with Ali. Pretty, we were supposed to have a 1 full month of hikes during the past April, but due to the war, we had to postpone till next April. But in between, we have the weekends in October so far. On your way, you discover the cultural heritage, the architecture of old houses. You meet people along the way. Um, this 450 kilometers has stretched to 600 by creating loops and side trails along the trail in order to bring the hikers into interesting and nice villages. We train local guides. This is part of our community commitment and involvement to create job opportunities. When we say we create 60 guides, it's 15 days of training spread over few months with experts in each topic. Topics like theology, first aid, communication, management, history, storytelling, etc. So it's a very, very rich curriculum of courses which are addressed to practitioners and not to academicians, so that they understand the language, they apply it, and they move on with a new job. After tomorrow, we're going to have a graduation ceremony at the Lebanese American University for those 60 new guides. We have an average of 60,000 hikes per year during the tough years, just to show you that nature today is the number one escape for Lebanese. They escape the tension they are living under, mainly in cities. They escape the ambiance of the war, and nature is definitely their best place to relax and enjoy their company. Food is definitely what the LMT offers to international hikers, and they love what the tasty Mediterranean variety of foods that is offered on the LMT. And what makes it special is that every every dish differs between one village and another. I mean, the same dish with the same name may have different tastes between one village and another because of the history and because of the cultural landscape that shapes every village, and it is translated into the type of food and the type of taste you can get while eating. So we definitely have international partnerships with the French Federation of Hiking, for example, of trail, sorry, so that we keep sharing experience in trail management. We develop, as I said, thematic trails with the local communities. In this case, we developed geologic trails where we bring hikers into trails to discover the rich geology of the area at a scientific level. With the American University of Beirut, with the geology department of this famous university, we were able to study scientifically what makes those geosites and those geothemes special on one trail and special on another trail. And we developed all the pamphlet and all the material on the website, and we've installed QR codes on the rocks so that students or hikers can understand the scenery they are watching when they are hiking. We are definitely a founding member of the Mediterranean Trails Network, which was newly launched a few months ago, based in France. Happy that the LMTA is taking the lead of this MedTrails network with 17 members already from North Africa, from Western Europe, from the Eastern Mediterranean. And definitely here with the communities, we develop side trails with them. These are trails that are developed with them and for them. And definitely on the LNT, you discover a cultural heritage. Imagine this Roman temple that was built with a stone with a black color of stones called basalt in French. So this is an area in North Lebanon where Ali will hike soon when she comes to Lebanon. You were supposed, Ali, to hike it on the first day of the through hike in April. With the communities, we introduced this famous wheelchair where we bring physically challenged people anywhere on the trail. We can take them in any valley, on any difficult slope with this famous wheelchair. It's a team experience. People cry every time we hike together. Either the people who are carrying the person or the person himself or herself, they cry of the joy of this experience of sharing these moments together. We hike with people with impaired vision. Not only we hike, but we run with them. We started hiking and then we started running 8 kilometers, and then the last run was for 25 kilometers, and now they are asking to run a marathon on the trail. This is really amazing to see people with impaired vision now hiking and running these long distances. So this is for me what I wanted to share with you, mainly related to the communities living along the trail. I finish with one good news. The Lebanon Mountain Trail is contributing now in developing the first long distance Christian pilgrimage trail in Lebanon and the Middle East. It is called Saint Charbel Trail, Camino de Saint Charbel. Saint Charbel is the saint patron of Lebanon. And the way we are designing this pilgrimage trail is very similar to the way Camino de Santiago was designed. So every kilometer you have a pole indicating the distance that leads you to Santiago, and with a lot of similarities. Thank you very much, Andrew and Laura.
Thank you, Omar. Yeah, there are some questions in the chat, but I think we can get to those and unpack those with Simon, I think, in the later part. And on to Ali.
Great. Well, thank you, Claudia and Omar. Fantastic presentations. And just to sort of touch base back into talking about developing communities, I think that I have not yet been to the Lebanon Mountain Trail, but in terms of working in collaboration with Omar and his team for 18 months, what I see is that this is a really long-term community development project in every kind of aspect, and including everyone. And it's one of the reasons why I've been so committed to this collaboration that is ongoing. So at Connecticut, we're predominantly an arts organization, and since 2010, I've been using walking as part of my practice, and now I'm calling it the act of walking. And primarily, I walk as a tool to connect people, community, and nature. And it's taken us on quite a long journey. Before we get to Lebanon, there's quite a long journey as how we got there. So we are now based in Thurrock, east of London, and somewhere that probably is not known for pilgrimages and or walking. However, we were invited to start a walking arts festival in Thurrock because many people didn't know where to walk and also didn't walk with each other or to places that they didn't know. So over the last 12 years, we've developed an annual walking, talking and making festival. And we've kind of illuminated lots of different stories that people didn't know about locally. And so we've started sort of reshaping the narrative of what's in Thurrock. So that model became very popular with other places. So we expanded in 2017 to a project that was called Silk River, which was our first international project. So I think what's really important is when you have these long trails that span across lots of different communities, as Omar was describing. So with Silk River, we walked from Kew Gardens to Southend along the River Thames, and we connected 10 communities in the UK with 10 communities in India, in West Bengal, when we walked along the River Hooghly. And the way that we made those two communities, or those 20 communities, one community, was that we drew and wrote the different stories and created these big silks, and we shared those online. So when we were walking in the UK, the people in India could experience it and comment and be part of the storytelling. And then when we took ourselves to India, the UK audience could also experience that. So we created kind of one community across those two rivers. So this has led to another massive project that we did last year, which was called Beat to Dreams, which was also a kind of pilgrimage, and it was a national UK walk around the coastline of the UK. And we were asking the question, how can we creatively reimagine our futures? And then in each of those places that we worked, we asked each of those artists and communities to ask a specific question. And in our case, it was like, where does color come from? And we were looking at the natural dyes of the silks that we use. So it's been very helpful for us to frame the walks, A, with an intention, and B, that intention is manifested in a series of questions. So as part of the WTN board, I was connected to Omar and Takla a couple of years ago, and they invited us to collaborate with them to tell the stories of the 27 communities along the Lebanon Mountain Trail. So clearly it was difficult for us to go and work directly. So we worked with Takla, who's the artist based there, to collect the stories from each one of the different communities and to write and to draw them. And then she came over to the UK to translate those drawings into these giant silk flags. So, and when she came, she brought all those stories, and she knew exactly what image was going to be on each flag. And we invited artists from different parts of the UK to come and help paint them. And even from that moment, we started creating this incredible following and support for the mountain trail. So here are some of the silks that we made. So each one relates to one of the days that we were going to hike along the LMTA. And Takla wrote the stories, and she wrote the values of each of the communities. So it was a real way into understanding more about the diversity, the biodiversity, and the landscape. And particularly, I think, from a European perspective, we don't hear those stories. And particularly at the time of war, we have no idea of the kind of the community life and the resilience of those communities. So in March, when the war broke out, we'd been having monthly Zooms with Omar and Takla, and we kept saying, can we have it? Can it happen? Can it happen? It really was only at the last minute, when it was absolutely impossible to imagine that we could go and the Beirut airport was closed, that we joined up with Omar to come up with a plan B. So I was very committed. I was like, I'd already taken a month off. I was like, whatever happens, I'm walking with Lebanon for 30 days, and it'll be a kind of pilgrimage to keep the Lebanon communities in our hearts and minds during that time. So we invited others. We did a global call out, and Walk, Listen, Create were absolutely essential in this. And we did a global call out for people to walk with us, walk with Lebanon for every day in April. And I'd been listening to Rutger Bregman, a social historian and philosopher, and he, in his Wreath lectures, he said, at this time of great war, anxiety, challenges from AI, he invited us to think about the 5 questions that Bertrand Russell asked in 1962. So Bertrand Russell was in prison for civil disobedience against the nuclear arms, and he asked us to ask ourselves, who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? How should we live? And what is sacred? So we found that a very useful framework, and we invited others to hold those questions as they walked with us every day in April. And some of those people are on the call today, I see. So it was really incredible. We had what we know of is that 67 walks took place from the 3rd of April to the 3rd of May across 6 continents, so 25 countries in one collective act of solidarity. And we have been collecting stories and images and films so that we're, literally today I spent all day trying to sort of pull those into some kind of edit and to think about what we might conclude, as this has now become not just a local community or a national community or a regional community. This has now become a global community. And what do we do with that energy? And it's so important to have this kind of positive reaction against the backdrop of war. So we finally made it, and some of us were walking in Turkey along the Lycian Way, and we did the first 5 days together, and we ended up on the mountains, and we traveled with some of these silks from Lebanon. So these were the 5 questions, and I'm just going to conclude now by reading a sort of summary of the answers to the questions. So, who are we? We are a community walking in solidarity with those living along the Lebanon Mountain Trail, where it is not possible to come together because of war. We believe that trails are pathways that exist beyond civilizations, that transcend borders, connecting us to each other and to extraordinary landscapes, creating a space for imagination where possibilities for a different kind of future emerge. Where did we come from? From UK, Turkey, Netherlands, Japan, Montenegro. We hiked along the Lycian Way, 470 kilometers that connects ancient cities of the Lycian civilization with the Mediterranean along the coast from Fethiye to Antalya. We met walkers from Argentina, Georgia, Russia, Ukraine, Korea, Thailand, Poland, Singapore, Netherlands, France, Belgium, USA, Kenya, Turkmenistan, Australia. We come from everywhere, somewhere, nowhere. In the shadow of the mountain, along these ancient trails, we stretch out a hand to help each other across a torrential river, give way on a narrow path, exchange greetings in our many languages, united in the act of walking. Where are we going? We are traversing the Tartali Mountains in Turkey. We are climbing the Alps, the Catalonian Pyrenees, the Madonni Mountains in Sicily. We are crossing the Western Ghats in India. We are drifting through parks in London, New York, Toronto, Paris, and Vienna. We are on our way to Lebanon. In the words of Rebecca Solnit, no straight road takes us there. The route is over mountains or through forests and beyond what we know. It may be through inconceivable beauty and transformation as well as peril. It may be uncharted or steep, or take decades or centuries to traverse. We may get there by storytelling, alliance, or the appearance of some unanticipated participants. There is a declaration of difficulty and uncertainty, but also of possibility that I offer as an encouragement to keep going. How should we live? Like this. For the 5 days that we trekked the Lycian Way, we stayed at Hotel Almani in Shirali. We slept soundly in wooden cabins, nestled in the base of the mountains towering above. A short walk to the beach for sunrise, where we looked east towards Lebanon. We lavished in picking fresh lemons and drinking the juice of oranges, abundant in the orchard. We were cared for by Aysel and Hafise, who prepared sumptuous meals from fresh vegetables and herbs grown in the garden. We were guided with dignity by Ursin and Oslim, respecting the ancient paths and all those who have come before us. Through walking these trails, we experience humanity at its best, connecting us across borders, cutting through language, united in taking one step after another, in traveling towards an unknown destination. The knowing comes in the walking, a narrative unfolding day after day through asking these universal questions that everyone can answer. We ask them again and again of ourselves, again of others. The answers are different. The answers say the same thing. A passion for life, a love of nature, a desire to connect to each other. So what is sacred? Spring, pouring out, bursting into colour, softly spilling over the harshy rocky surfaces, shoots in every crack, the flowers, the bulbs, the grasses, the fruit, the thorns, the prickly stings on our shins. What is sacred? Hope as we walk together throughout the month, sharing snippets of half-told stories. We felt part of something, enough to strengthen our minds to keep going a little longer, to look closer and try harder. What is sacred? Freedom to change the story, watching the planet spring back to life against the backdrop of war. Nothing can stop the spring.
Beautifully put, Ali. Thank you for ending on such a note, I think. And yeah, I think it would be a nice way to segue into maybe just reflecting on those 5 questions to some of the speakers if they feel, that there is something they would also like to add or respond to that. a chance to ask each other some questions. Claudia, Alma, and Simon, if you wanted to also nip in here.
But I can respond quickly and then just to your specific question about the questions, Laura. What strikes me, one of the things that strikes me about those questions is that 4 of them contain the word we. And so in a sense, it's asking, kind of who are we, but also how can we create and work together? And it seems to me that one of the kind of messages I'm getting from these talks is that there's a sense in which the we should not just be taken for granted as a fixed identity, that what actually each one of you is doing in different kinds of ways is making an assertion about how we can create or recreate a sense of who we might be. So it's not just a question of going over old tracks. It's actually using pilgrimage to be creative and to ask questions about community through the actions that pilgrimage require people to make. And I can say a lot more about that, but I'll let other people respond to that if they wish before I say anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, great way to put it, through the actions of pilgrimage. Is not necessarily something we've explored yet as part of this series or said in that way. So yeah, I don't know, Claudia or Omar, do you have any reflections or any questions for any of the other speakers that you could bring to the forefront?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Omar, how do you see the trail as a pilgrimage trail, or how do you relate that? I mean, you were talking at the end about the first Christian pilgrimage trail, I think, but also the trail itself. Do you see it as a pilgrimage, or do you see it as a long distance trail? What is the difference?
Yes, definitely any trail could be a pilgrimage trail because spiritual experiences are always there. Whatever is the religion of anyone, whatever is the even people who do not believe. When they are in nature, they are close to a world that takes us to somewhere else. So it depends on the background of each person, the cultural background, the spiritual background, the religious background, but definitely any trail offers a pilgrimage experience. And the Lebanon Mountain Trail definitely is an excellent place to provide this type of experience. Whereas the other trail that I mentioned at the end, which is a trail dedicated to Saint Charbel. Saint Charbel is considered to be the saint patron of Lebanon. So although he is a Christian saint, but he is highly respected by non-Christians in Lebanon. And if you go to Anaya, where he was buried, and you observe the profile of of persons visiting every day this monastery, you realize that at spiritual level, he is really the saint of Lebanon. And in one way or another, the trail, which was designed and being developed right now, was designed in a way to attract non-Christians as well. Because going back to my first answer about the Lebanon Mountain Trail, the context is very similar. And it depends on every hiker to consider his experience or her experience as a pilgrimage, more spiritual, less spiritual, more social, or with herself or with himself. Voilà. Merci.
Thank you. I have more questions on that, but let other people talk.
Can I just add on to that question? I think one of the things that you mentioned was around the religious diversity along the trail, and obviously that how pilgrimage can be associated with one religion, and how does that feel, the multitude of narratives along like this connective thread is all kind of one messaging, but then the identities within those localities might be how do they respond to said spiritual experience happening in their bread and breakfast. I don't know, like how is it kind of naturalized, I guess.
Well, people, appreciate to discover what is different on the trail. You will be surprised by the positive outcomes of the encounters with the locals who are from other religious background, because the context is different from other contexts. People, when you are a tourist, you are perceived differently by the hosts, and when you are a tourist, you perceive the host differently from the people you live with them on daily basis in the normal place where you live. So it happens that you want to discover the positive side of the other, be it the host or be it the tourist. And since you are immersed in nature, nature gives you another perspective about others who are hiking with you. And this is why on the LNT, when we see Lebanese from different religions and from different regions hiking together, it's the LNT, it's the nature that brings them and that tells them where we belong to one country, we share this beautiful country, this beautiful nature, these beautiful traditions by people living along the trail, and it unites people. So at spiritual level, the Lebanese people, they move from the low level of daily tension among confessions, living in cities mainly, into the upper mountain where they are close to the sky, close to the mountain, where they are really the mountain itself offers them this context of liberating themselves from what was considered as a weight on their pre-assumptions about others, etc.
Can I ask a question about that? Actually, which
Please.
applies to all of you. I mean, just in terms of I guess a comment and a question. The comment is that Omar, it struck me that in a certain sense, your presentation linked with Claudia's in the sense that what you're interested in, Omar, is a kind of movement of scale across communities. So allowing people to kind of see how what they may share across community. And Claudia, I thought this image of you walking from England to Germany post-Brexit, a kind of repairing that split. So it's a way of creating a kind of connection in a possible sense. But my question for all three of you is actually refers to an interview I did yesterday with somebody who's creating their own pilgrimage routes in England. And the question was really, is it possible to create an urban pilgrimage? In other words, to what extent is nature, as you describe it, necessarily something which is located out of cities, out of dense community? How do we think about pilgrimage in the city, and possibly a city that is ugly? So how can we create these kinds of situations in those contexts?
Should I go? So Simon, I was explaining that we run this walking festival in Thurrock, and it's a place where most people haven't heard of, let alone would know where to walk. And I guess we haven't done it as a one pilgrimage, unless you could say it's been an exploration of a pilgrimage to Thurrock over 12 years. But it's a place where, we've been thinking about what does it mean to be home in Thurrock and seeing things differently and shining a spotlight on the things that do tell stories and do offer hope. And so I think it's really important. And obviously, this was not in any religious context and or political context, but it certainly was a way of bringing people together of different cultural and political backgrounds together in something that is relatively neutral in terms of walking and looking at place. And I suppose what I was talking about as well when I was doing the feedback to what we did along the Lycian Way, as we weren't in Lebanon. So all those countries that I listed were the places that people came from over the period of less than 5 days. So, the whole world was walking. And, when I said we had to get across a river really you just get across a river and you're walking human to human. So you've got Russians and Ukrainians who are walking the same path, and we're not very far. And the Lycine Way is not at all far from Lebanon, and it's in that part of the contested part of the world at the moment. But when you're walking those trails, and it was a through hike, that is your focus, and your focus is on other people, survival, feeding, exchange, and conversation. So yeah, I mean, it's just all round. I think it's a very, very powerful tool to use walking, but also to walk across distance. So I think, and I think it's because also over every day, that you're building a conversation, you're building a narrative that builds over, which has the similarities, I guess, with pilgrimage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Omar, I think I got a hand up.
Yes, Simon, going back to your question about the possibility of doing a pilgrimage in an ugly urban context. I can give you the example of Calcutta. Mother Teresa of Calcutta is a typical example of where people go to Calcutta to experiment something very spiritual in a very strange context, so different from any context we're living in, facing situations where we never imagined that people are living in, yet it has a spiritual or social. Some people consider it as a spiritual, some others consider it as social, yet they do this pilgrimage in an urban context. So it depends on the motivation of the pilgrims. Then the meaning of this pilgrimage becomes important in a specific urban context. So if there is a match between the motivation and the cause, the urban context, even if it is ugly, the way you described it, becomes a place that attracts those people to do an urban pilgrimage.
Can I also say something to this? I think it's a question I've been thinking about a lot, and oh no, sorry. Sorry, I need to close this one. Oh God, where am I? Sorry, are you still here?
We're still here, I think.
Suddenly my son phoning me. And what I wanted to say is I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think I can do it as a person, just me, and if there was a really important thing to me as a personal pilgrimage at the other end of the city. But recently I've been doing a project it's called Me No Pause, from menopause, but instead of menopause, it's Me No Pause. And it's about aging. And I do one-to-one walks with different people are talking about aging. And it is here in Edinburgh where I live, but I find it very difficult to have any meaningful walking or talking when I'm in the city, because you always have to look out for traffic, and you often can't walk. You stumble over cars or other people. You have to constantly concentrate on other things. Whereas what I then deliberately do is find green spaces where we can meander along a river or that kind of thing. And here I'm living at the coast, so that's possible as well. But and it's something that I have come across, and a lot of walking artists do, of course, urban walks. There are lots of people in London, in particular, and I don't want to diminish what they're doing, but I feel that kind of, from my own testing, this kind of more connecting you to the place and the spiritual thing is actually somehow much easier in the countryside. I don't know. This is not answering your question, but I'd like to know what you think about that, because I've been pondering about this a lot.
I suppose I'll just put forward one response, which is just the first thing that comes into my head, really. So I have no idea what to make of it, which is, in a sense, it's not really a question, therefore, of beautiful or ugly. To follow some of what you're saying, it's actually it's places that allow you to share focused attention with somebody else. So there's a sense in which it's not, you're not having to worry about being run over by a truck, but also, Tim Ingold and others talk about how pilgrimage, when you're going on pilgrimage, you're walking with somebody. You might be walking one after the other, but you also often walking together. And so there's a sense in which you're sharing the same perspective.
Yeah.
So this becomes a mode of shared, sustained attention, and which and it doesn't have to be beautiful or a beautiful or an ugly place, but it has to afford the possibility of being able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the point. It's not about the beautiful or ugly, but it's more about can you actually give attention to the place where you're walking to? And
yes.
I think that then goes back to, Ali's point about walking with intention and these and thinking about these. And I also really loved, Ali, when you talked about Beach of Dreams and how you could reimagine our futures. I think that was a really interesting point, linking to what you're talking about, Simon. I think if you begin your pilgrimage from an urban and ugly space and you go out and you do this fantastic, parallel walking experience and you reach some kind of enlightenment and then you return to said ugly space, it's how is the future made possible to integrate such disparate, like such difference now, I guess, in medieval times and times gone by where pilgrimage was something that you did, and perhaps that estrangement from nature has accelerated, with the majority of people going forward in the future are going to be living in urban, stressed and water stressed, climate stressed environments, leaving these small pockets of rurality as like rural spaces as almost like a, this other world. And how are we preparing these spaces and this way of continuing these stories into that kind of future where people are going to have to leave that space to kind of reach, which nature is always there. It's even in the big ugly city, isn't it? Nature isn't going anywhere, still breathing the air, but it's how are we thinking about pilgrimage for the future? I think that might be the next series talk, because I think it's been something we've been thinking about a little bit in this. And as you said, Amar, in times of like war, in times people are retreating, but then you've still got to go back to your home. People are still working that 9 to 5. Claudia, I love that. The 9 to 5 pilgrim. Yeah, food for thought.
actually, some people were here in the comments saying this ugly and not so ugly. I don't feel. I think to me that's not so relevant, because I think every place somehow is interesting. But it has to be said, at least in Edinburgh, the more beautiful it is, the less you can walk, because it's chock-a-block with people.
I think I would agree. I think Molly says, this is in the chat, why does the urban have to be described as ugly? And I think, yeah, that's fair enough. I think perhaps when we are talking about modes of attention, particular modes of attention. But one thing I would ask again, everybody, is, and this goes back to a previous session, which unfortunately I wasn't at, which is the extent to which you're describing situations where people are clearly making an effort. They're walking, they're creating, they're connecting. But to what extent, and I think to go to a question that you asked, Lora, which is what happens when you come back to the place, which may or may not be ugly. But to what extent are we actually talking about occasions where actually the creation of narrative, remembering the pilgrimage experience, can of course be taken into other parts of your life?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just actually a question of focusing on the actions of the pilgrimage, it's actually thinking about the aftermath and how that might be incorporated into people's lives. Ali, it looks like you wanted to say something about that.
I've always got lots to say about all of this. So I think something about pilgrimages for the future, something I would say is that when you're walking, you are often encountering strangers, and then you may be walking with strangers who very quickly become fellow walkers or companions or really good friends. And I think, we are going to be having to have skills where we can live with less and be more resilient and more open and more tolerant. And there's nothing better to prepare you than to be an experienced long distance hiker, I'd say. So on your second question, I experienced my first really long distance walk with a completely non-religious organization called the Long Distance Walking Association, who do exactly that. They have this crazy challenge event where you have to walk 100 miles in less than 48 hours. And so somehow I got persuaded to do this. When I was 50, I was going to be 50, and I thought, well, let's walk 100 miles because I'm going to be 50, I'm going to do it. And the veteran walkers were like, well, Ali, the thing you have to do is you just have to think about walking from checkpoint to checkpoint. If you think you're going to walk 100 miles, you'll never do it. But if you're just thinking and walk to the mile number 7, you'll get there, and then you just think about the next one. So I decided that what I would do in order, quite often, if it's a really big physical challenge, I will think about something to stop me thinking about how many miles it is. So I decided to walk out my whole life. So I decided from 1 to 50, I would think about as many things I could remember between 0 and 7 and 7 and 11. And then post 50, I would imagine what it would be like to be 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And I remember the times, which I think was around the 75-year-old mark, 75-mile mark, going through the second night at probably, I don't know, 35 hours in or something, where I had a real dip, and I just thought, I cannot get up that hill. And I thought, it's okay. Being 75 might not be very good, but by the time I was doing 9 to 100, we were flying into the end there. So when I came back that next day, and I just slept for about 4 hours, and when I got up, I just felt $1 million. I was like, I walked 100 miles in 40 hours. I can do anything. So when I now do these massive, big projects, like ridiculous projects like Beechwood Dreams and Silk River, and I absolutely do not know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do those projects. I just think it's just like that 100-mile walk. Just get to the next checkpoint and then take a look around and go, okay, and what's the next checkpoint? And when you have a dip, an obstacle, and you can't climb over the star, you just go, oh, it's just one of those moments in that long journey. And you don't get frightened of it. And so for me, the LDWA, I have to credit for giving me my kind of strongest tool for getting over these really impossible projects.
So long distance is kind of lots of short distances added together.
Yeah.
Lora, should we ask people to ask questions, throw it open to the floor? I'm not sure whether you wish to do that. I don't know what the format is. Yeah.
Yes, I think, if you want to lead on that.
This is wonderful. It was fascinating. And one of the questions I had about the Lebanon Mountain Trail, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, but it's related to what we were talking about, is that I was very struck, Omar, by the different religious groups that you pass through on the way, and of the pilgrim, which brought to me this idea of is the pilgrim then the connector between places that might neighbor each other but may not actually be as in close connection with each other except for geographically, and is the pilgrim part of the pilgrim's work, so to say, is to be that connecting mind or spirit that is, by walking through, can make those links.
Obviously, the pilgrims are creating this spirit of openness and acceptance, since they move from one region to another, from one community to another, and since the land is a common variable among those communities, people, they work the land, even if they are from different religious background. The land is a common ground. And you all know probably those mainly who've been close to the land, I mean working the land and benefiting from the generosity of the land. People who grew vegetables, fruits, who work the land, uh, they look similar to each other in their way of thinking, in their generosity, in their perspective to nature. Um, so this first links communities indirectly without knowing this. When a tourist comes and feels and discovers these common grounds among those community members, then he feels like I have to tell them, wow, although you're different, but you have a lot of common things with communities that I met in other areas. We've heard this a lot from pilgrims, and I keep hearing this uh, from Lebanese who've been in direct contact with community members along the trail. Hope I answered your question.
Yes, that's great. I want to bring up this urban question again because I feel like that I started out walking, as many as you know, by doing a circumnavigation of the city that I live in, and have done parts of it ever since. And one of my collaborators on that really always refers to that as a pilgrimage, and a lot of it is ugly or difficult, but it's a way of. It felt very intimate. It's an intimate way of getting to know the city. But one of the other things that has come up over the years is also that there are neighborhoods where there would be a neighborhood like in the southwest of the city where people would say, oh, you don't want to go to that neighborhood. It's really scary and you don't want to deal with those people. And then the people who live in that other neighborhood say the same about the people who live in the southwest, which I think is a common, not uncommon in urban areas. So one of the things we're talking about is putting together like a sister neighborhood program because everyone who's done the walk can now see the similarities. These are both sort of working class neighborhoods. The difference is racial mostly. They've had a lot of issues with industry on their fringes that have made them suspicious of the government and things like that. So anyway, I'm thinking, so there's both a secular context where if you think in terms of pilgrimage, you're thinking in terms of unity. So that was like, I really loved what Simon said about the forging. What did you say? You said something about forging the we, making the we, incising it, that's with your feet. And I feel that that's part of what happens the more that you walk and that you walk as a pilgrim connecting places that you then become aware of that there is a we that exists. And right now, I think we're in an era, especially in my country, where there's a kind of suspicion of we and wanting to build further divisions. So it's important work.
Yeah, I was also going to ask Jenny. Is Jenny there? You're talking about internal and external worlds, and we haven't talked as much about the internal. We've spoken quite a lot about the external. So I wondered, Jenny, if you wanted to say something there.
Yes, I think it's that interesting idea about intention. And so the amazing walks that you've all been talking about, which have been fascinating, which are really incredibly incredible activism, I would say, and very political, but also it's that kind of balancing it on that very personal level as well. And thinking of that, also kind of I also wanted to think or ask about pilgrimage as a shorter walk, because a lot of these walks are greatly extended and that's not always a possibility. And just kind of just wondered if you had any comments about, I've done pilgrimages, but they've always had to be shorter because I'm constrained by lots of other things. So two very different things, but I'm throwing it out there.
Does anyone on the panel want to respond to that? Simon?
I mean, really, other people should respond, but I'll respond quickly, Jenny, which is to say that the site where I work, Walsingham in North Norfolk, is actually not a site that a vast number of people walk a long distance. I mean, you can walk. People do walk from Cambridge there, and the people are setting up the Walsingham Way, where you can walk from Norwich to Walsingham. So, but on the whole, actually, people are getting there by car. Sometimes by bicycle, but a lot of traditionally actually by coach. And what's really striking about that, in fact, is that within this village, there are nonetheless pathways. So you get off your coach, you put your stuff away, and then you're walking in community together. And the Holy Mile is actually for instance, is about 1.1 miles. But that is a walk which is utterly significant for so many people. And you're walking in a different, you're not walking as you would do in other parts of your life. You're walking together slowly, looking at your surroundings. You may be silent, you may be in conversation. So there you see actually not a long distance, but nonetheless a potentially deeply intense walk. So I'll just make that comment, but other people can talk about the kinds of walking that they've been discussing today.
Any other members of the panel want to say something or respond to what Jenny was saying?
I don't know. I just don't think pilgrimages have to be long. I mean, that's how we happen to talk about, but I'm sure they can be also short or a day long or something, or they can be. I originally come from the Alps, and actually it has been common that you send somebody else on a pilgrimage, that especially among like wealthy landowners or something, and then they had what do you call it, sort of workers who never got a break. That was their holiday, but they sent these workers onto the pilgrimage on their behalf. So this would be like the Santa Maria walk or something, and they would go for a week or two or even for 4 weeks and walk on behalf of the landowner, and that's the way how they got their break. So maybe you can send somebody else, Jenny. No, I'm only joking.
Alexandra, do you want to say something, having been a speaker on a previous event? Are you there, Alexandra?
Not quite the same as normal. So just quickly, I guess with reference to my comment that I put in the chat and about this question of the urban and the rural, but maybe, as I put it, the beautiful and the not so beautiful, because there's always not, maybe that's more egalitarian way of saying it. But the other thing is, I think the urban-rural divide is a bit, it's in our culture in the West, right? Because it comes from Romanticism. And so much of our walking, thinking, writing art is straight out of that era still. And, that the solution the artists then came to was flee the city and go to the Lake District or other places like that. And so it's still deep in our brains. And when I was on my first pilgrimage, and I would compulsively photograph everything, as I generally do, from the industrial eastern parts generally. Eastern parts of cities that you go through to of course, the more pastoral scenes you go through. And people would kind of be like, why are you photographing that, right? when we're passing through the not so beautiful places. But I found that was important to sort of the lesson for me, or the resolution. As I think someone else said, we live in an era where those landscapes are part of our life. And so pilgrimage, if you walk the whole pilgrimage, generally, whatever it is, it does connect those places. Now, of course, a lot of people take the bus. You notice that, right? Through the eastern industrial section of the city. And that's fine. But for me, it was incredibly important always, walk past the graveyards, which somehow the pilgrimage route always does. Walk past the trash processing plant, which somehow the pilgrimage always does. And incorporate that into my understanding of the place, and even into maybe somehow reconciling that through the art I make of the place.
No, thank you, Alexander. That's helpful. Thank you. Really some good points. Yeah, Jenny asked, does there need to be a final place? I put in the question about whether a pilgrimage has to end in a sacred place, or can sacred places evolve through the pilgrimage, and what's sacred to whom? That sort of kind of question. Simon, I don't know whether you
Well,
have
I'll give you an anthropological answer, because I guess that's one of my identities, which is to say, and this actually goes back to something that Anne mentioned when you were talking about the sacred and the secular. And it seems to me that one answer is actually to say that one of the things that we've been talking either implicitly or explicitly today is about the fact that, in a way, the sacred may not be in place. It's about people in place. And so we find possibly the sacred in each other, acting in certain ways towards each other. And possibly this is prompted by doing certain things, but also being in certain places. But actually, an anthropological response might be to say that the sacred is actually in community and in discovering aspects of each other that we may or may not have known. And therefore, it seems to me that you, as I say, place is significant, but we're not actually necessarily locating the sacred in any single place.
Well, one of the things that Laura and I discussed was that when we were talking about where do we go next with this series of conversations, and we were thinking that it was clear that what we hadn't explored very much was other religions. So I'm really keen that Omar brought that up, that there are lots of different religions along the represented by different communities and things. And that's something that we've not done. So there are lots of things that we continue talking about and chatting about and discussing. But it was very funny because I read This Holy Island, and I feel terribly embarrassed because we had the author on one of our writers' salons, and I can't remember what his name is. It's just escaped, gone from my mind. But he was talking about how important, the secular pilgrimage is for large numbers of people, especially in terms of what we've just maybe observed, witnessed, been involved in, and that's the World Cup football. And football is people make pilgrimage to all sorts of things linked to football. It's not something that I have any interest at all. I was sent to a school where we all played rugby, and hockey, and I know nothing about football at all. But I do know that football plays very highly. Thank you, Oliver Smith. Thank you, and me and Laura. So I couldn't remember who the poor chap was. So there's plenty more that we can explore. Anyway, what we normally say at this year, Claudia, have another go.
No, just quickly on that as well, is that a lot of pilgrimages don't take place on foot anymore. And, especially the most important one is probably Mecca, and most people just fly in there now. Very few would walk it. And so we are almost assuming that pilgrimage is always on foot. Yeah.
Yes, I think in the Hajj they have to walk a short distance, but I think it's even less than the Holy Mile sign that you're talking about. I think
it's usually a lot hotter.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, look, thank you to everyone who's taken part. And I think what we do now is we give our guests the last word, so we each give them a chance to say something, and then really put the pressure on Laura because we asked her to sum it all up, which is going to be a tough call. But I just want to thank everyone who's taken part during the six monthly events we've had. And we're looking at possibly bringing together people again in about a month or 6 weeks' time, maybe, to have a discussion just about how we plan another series if we so wish to do another series. And look to do that perhaps in the spring. So it's the last word from each of our presenters. So in order of appearance, Claudia, would you like to go first with the last word?
Oh God, you put me here on the spot. I just can say, I don't know, keep walking, keep walking on your own and keep walking with people, but don't feel you always have to use the tourist trodden path. Okay, that's all I can think of just now.
Okay, Omar.
Yes, what I want to say is thank you for sharing and discussing and listening to each other. And definitely, it's a call to invite you next April when Ali comes to Lebanon for the through hike. If the situation gets better in Lebanon, then yes, you'll have one of the most beautiful experiences and most interesting pilgrimage on the Lebanon Mountain Trail.
Omar, can I just ask, can people do it now or is it stopped somehow?
Yes, you can do at least let's say 380 kilometers of the 450, but August and September is hot. I mean,
It's too hot, yeah.
you won't enjoy it. Starting October, between October and May, you have 7 months of even 8 months of good weather.
Okay, I'll be in touch.
Yes.
Over to you, Ali.
Well, I would echo what Omar has said. I'm still waiting to get to Lebanon. Maybe I'll be there in September. But what I wanted to pick up on was the sacred and the secular. So I would agree that you can find the sacred in each other and in community. And it's quite interesting that when I've used the word sacred or asked other people to think about what is sacred, there has been sometimes a resistance to use that word. And so I think because in different religions it has different connotations, but I kind of feel like we need to own it, and we need sacred in our lives. And I'm going to adopt that to sacred is in community.
And Simon.
I guess linking a little bit with that, one of the things that has struck me has come up at various points in the discussion is that in terms of making community, one of the things that pilgrimage often requires us to do is to make ourselves vulnerable to the elements or to the other, to the environment, to each other, to the unpredictable sometimes. And so there's a certain sense in which allowing oneself to be vulnerable invites somebody else in. And of course, this is also to do with the relationship between guest and host. And it seems to me that that's one of the ways in which pilgrimage, only one of the ways in which pilgrimage can make community is also by requiring us, as I say, to need each other.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And so, Laura, it's over to you.
I just want to say thank you to those who have been present every single month for the past 6 months. This has been a really fascinating and important series, and I'm really glad to have joined the World Trails Network and to be able to start exploring these themes on such an international scale. So really, first and foremost, just big up everyone who's here today. And I'm looking forward to the next stage of this, but today has really been putting pilgrimage back onto the geopolitical kind of putting it at the center of that and actually realizing the radical necessity of the we, of the us, of the unity, of the fractal, the fractured nature from, urban to boundaries, to borders, to, all of these things that we've listened to in terms of finding home and identity, familiarity, strength in community, vulnerability, and it's there that we find the sacred. And I think just want to really bring animate your words there on a spirit of openness. I think if we all have a spirit of openness, we can continue to walk with goodness. I just leave it there. I have nothing else, just borrowing Omar's words there. Spirit of openness is where I'll leave it today. So yeah, let's continue.
All right, thank you, and thanks everybody, and we'll be in touch very shortly. But a big thank you to Omar, Simon, Claudia, and Ali, especially. That was very, very valuable ending to our 6-month series.